A valedictorian's graduation speech just exposed my biggest secret. Now, an agent has shown up to prove I'm not the stepmother everyone thinks I am, but something far more shocking. The auditorium air was thick, smelling of polished wood, nervous sweat, and the sickly sweet perfume my mother-in-law insisted on wearing to every major life event. I kept adjusting the stiff collar of my borrowed blazer, feeling more like an imposter than a proud graduate receiving an honorary doctorate, a late-in-life recognition for decades of work in museum curation that I'd almost given up on. But this wasn't about me, it was about Chloe. Chloe, my stepdaughter, was walking across the stage in 20 minutes. She was graduating high school, top of her class, heading off to study astrophysics on a full scholarship. She was my entire world, or at least that's what I'd spent the last 10 years trying to convince her of. 10 years. It felt like a lifetime since I first met her father, David. He was charming, attentive, and carried the quiet sadness of a man who'd lost his wife too young. And then there was Chloe, a tiny, fierce 5-year-old with eyes the color of storm clouds, who treated me like an unwelcome piece of furniture. The first few years were a minefield of broken tea sets, slammed doors, and whispered accusations when David wasn't around. I never tried to replace her mother. I just tried to be present. I learned to bake her favorite lemon bars, sat through endless Saturday morning cartoons, and somehow, miraculously, earned a hesitant nod of approval when I fixed her favorite, battered teddy bear with surgical precision. Over the past 5 years, we'd found a rhythm, a genuine, loving rhythm. She called me when she bombed a test. I called her when I was stuck on a particularly difficult restoration project. We were a team. David often joked that she loved me more than him now, and Chloe would roll her eyes but secretly preen. I finally felt like I'd achieved the impossible. I was her mom, at least in the functional, everyday sense of the word. But today was different. Today was a transition point. College applications were signed, goodbyes were looming, and the weight of a future without constant proximity seemed to be pressing down on her. I scanned the sea of black robes, clutching my phone. David was supposed to be here. He'd left work early, swearing he wouldn't miss this. I saw him finally, wrestling with a rogue camera tripod near the entrance, looking frazzled but beaming. I waved, relief washing over me. At least one of us was looking forward to celebrating. The ceremony started. Names were called. Triumphs were announced. My own honorary doctorate felt like a distant, lukewarm event compared to the palpable anticipation for Chloe's final appearance. I pulled out my small, expensive camera, ready to capture the moment she crossed the stage and accepted that oversized diploma tube. Finally, the principal boomed, and now, presenting the valedictorian of the class of 2024, Chloe Elizabeth Hayes. My breath caught. There she was. Radiant in her borrowed robe, hair perfect, a genuine, unforced smile gracing her lips as she walked toward the podium to deliver her address. I filmed every step, whispering encouragement under my breath, tears stinging my eyes. She was beautiful, brilliant, and she was about to fly. She reached the microphone, adjusted it slightly, a nervous tic I knew well, and looked out at the crowd. She scanned the faces, her gaze sweeping past her father, past the extended family tables, and then for just a fraction of a second, her eyes locked onto mine. I managed a huge, proud smile, mouthing, "I love you." She took a deep, visible breath, and then she began to speak. Her opening remarks were flawless, traditional, thanking teachers and friends. Then she shifted tone. "But today I want to talk about family," she said. her voice suddenly resonating with a sharp, almost metallic edge. The families we build, the families we inherit, and the people who try very hard to fit into spaces they were never meant to occupy. My smile faltered. David shifted uncomfortably beside me, glancing at me with a confused frown. I told myself it was just a philosophical pivot, that she was talking about her late mother, perhaps. I squeezed David's hand, trying to project calm. Chloe continued, leaning into the microphone like she was about to reveal a national secret. When my mother passed away, my dad, he did what he thought was best. He brought someone new into our lives, someone who tried to bake the right cookies, wear the right sweaters, and learn the right bedtime stories. Her voice cracked slightly, but the expression on her face wasn't sadness. It was hard, crystalline anger. And for a while, I thought maybe I could accept the substitute. Maybe I could learn to love the replacement. She paused, and the silence in the vast auditorium was so profound you could hear the HVAC system humming. She looked directly at me again, and this time there was no warmth, no recognition, just cold dismissal. But I need to be absolutely clear, standing here today on the precipice of my actual future, she declared, her voice ringing with terrible finality. I want everyone to know this truth, because I owe no more lies to the person who thinks she has earned a place at my table. She straightened her posture, her eyes blazing. You, she articulated slowly, pointing a perfectly manicured finger right at my chest, are not my real mom. The sound of the word mom echoing off the rafters felt like a physical blow. A wave of muffled gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt the blood drain from my face, the heat of 1,000 sudden eyes turning toward me. David shot up out of his seat, starting toward the stage, his face a mask of horror. But Chloe wasn't finished. She looked down at the diploma in her hand, then back up at the stunned audience, a strange, almost manic energy radiating from her. And I was ready to live with that painful reality, she whispered, her voice dropping low, forcing everyone to lean in to hear the next devastating words. But what he didn't tell me about her, what he hid from both of us for 10 years, is so much worse than just being a stepmother. The silence that followed Chloe's dramatic pronouncement was louder than any applause could have been. It was the sound of reality fracturing. David was moving fast now, vaulting over the aisle chairs, his face etched with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Fear, perhaps, or desperate damage control. I remained frozen, rooted to my seat, the world having narrowed down to the searing spotlight focused on the stage and the venomous look Chloe was directing solely at me. What didn't he tell me? The question hammered in my skull. Chloe was spiraling. The pressure of the day must have finally cracked her composure. She was trying to hurt me, perhaps lash out at the perceived interference in her grief for her biological mother. That had to be it. I started to rise, intending to walk toward the stage, to physically pull her away and stop this public execution before David reached her. But David reached the stage first. He wasn't trying to comfort Chloe. He was trying to silence her. I watched in slow motion as he grabbed the microphone stand, pulling it toward him, his eyes wild. "Chloe, that's enough! Get down!" David hissed into the mic, but his voice was too shaky, his authority completely undermined by the spectacle he'd created. Chloe violently shoved his hand away. "No, I won't be quiet anymore, David. This is about what you did and what she is hiding." The principal, pale and sweating, rushed up behind David, trying to physically intervene, but Chloe was operating on pure adrenaline. She gripped the edges of the podium, leaning back into the microphone like a seasoned demagogue. Everyone thinks I'm graduating today. They think I'm off to Caltech to study the stars. That's the narrative we all agreed on. Right, Mom? She spat the title out like poison. She looked straight at me again, her storm cloud eyes piercing. Well, here's the final plot twist, courtesy of your beloved stepdaughter. She reached into the pocket of her gown, and I saw the glint of something small and metallic. My heart seized. It wasn't a key or a phone. It looked like a small antique locket, the very one my mother had given me on my 16th birthday, the one I thought I had lost years ago when I first moved into David's house. When I was cleaning out the attic last week, Chloe continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried perfectly across the vast hall. Looking for some old photo albums to take to college, I found this, hidden deep inside a box labeled "Financial Records Do Not Open." It wasn't in my mother's things, was it, Dad? It was hidden in your safe deposit box, key stash. She held up the locket, turning it so the setting sunlight caught the tarnished silver. It was undeniably mine. My fingers instinctively flew to my own neck, checking for the familiar weight that hadn't been there in nearly a decade. "This locket," Chloe declared, raising her voice again, a wicked triumph coloring her tone, "was my mother's favorite. Except it wasn't her favorite before she married Dad. It was her favorite after she met the woman who convinced her to leave her first husband. The woman who taught her how to bake those lemon bars, remember, Dad?" David let out a strangled, guttural sound. He looked like he'd been physically struck. The principal had finally managed to grab Chloe's arm, but she yanked free with surprising strength. "You see, I researched the dates on the property deeds and the old insurance policies." Chloe pushed on, her momentum unstoppable. "My mother didn't die in a tragic car accident 3 years before Dad met her." She pointed at me again, but this time the gesture encompassed the entire audience, as if I were a known criminal on display. "She died 2 years after she signed the divorce papers from her first husband. And the man she divorced? He ended up being the primary investor in the very museum where she, the woman who claims to be my mother figure, just got an honorary doctorate." The audience was no longer just gasping. People were murmuring loudly, pulling out phones, the scene transforming from a graduation ceremony into a true public scandal. I felt dizzy, the edges of my vision blurring. My mother's locket? My mother's first husband? What in God's name was she talking about? My mother had been dead since I was 10, and David had been a widower long before I met him. "I didn't understand it at first," Chloe went on, her eyes blazing with the fervor of a detective who just connected the final, impossible dots. "But then I found the letter tucked inside the locket, a letter written to my biological mother, apologizing for leaving her for a life with David, a life that started before my biological mother was even divorced from her first husband, a life that started with you." She looked directly at me, the accusation hanging heavy and unmistakable in the air. "So, here's the real reason I'm not going to Caltech and why I can't celebrate today," Chloe announced, gripping the podium so hard her knuckles were white. "Because the woman standing there pretending to be my loving stepmother, she's not just a substitute, she's the reason my mother was never truly happy. She's the reason my mother left her first husband. And the reason, I suspect, she was so eager to marry David right after that divorce was finalized, because she was carrying secrets that could ruin everyone." Chloe took one last dramatic step back from the microphone, breathing heavily, basking in the horrified silence. Then she dropped the locket onto the stage floor with a small, sharp clink. "And the biggest secret of all," she said, her voice dropping to a chilling, almost inaudible level, aimed only at me, her eyes wide and utterly unhinged, "is that I finally found the paperwork, the real paperwork. And you know what, Mom? The woman who was married to my real father before he died, she wasn't your mother's friend, was she? She was your sister. And the reason you were so obsessed with filling the mom role for me wasn't because you wanted David. It was because you needed to replace the life you stole from her when you ran off with my dad years ago before she even married him." David let out a raw scream and finally lunged forward, tackling Chloe away from the microphone, but it was too late. The entire crowd had heard it. My sister? My mother's life stolen? I stared at the fallen locket, the pieces of my entire life story suddenly scattering into impossible, terrifying shapes. Before I could move, before David could drag Chloe off the stage, a small, thin man in a dark suit, who I had never seen before, sitting quietly in the faculty section, shot up from his seat not toward David, but directly toward me. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking only at me, holding something silver and official-looking in his hand. "Eleanor Vance," the man hissed, his voice dangerously calm as he reached my row, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "The game is over. I need you to come with me now. We have a lot to discuss regarding the original will of Clara Hayes." The grip on my arm was ironclad, instantly sobering me from the shock of Chloe's accusations. The silver object the man held wasn't a weapon, but it felt infinitely more threatening. It looked like a badge, the kind a private investigator, or worse, a federal agent might carry. "Who are you? Let go of me," I managed to choke out, wrenching my arm, but the man held firm. He was lean, impeccably dressed in a suit that looked too heavy for the late spring heat, and his eyes were fixed on mine with an unnerving, professional detachment. David was still grappling with Chloe on the stage, a pathetic, desperate battle being fought under the sudden flash of dozens of cell phone cameras. He hadn't noticed the man reaching me yet. The principal was shouting for security, but the entire scene had dissolved into chaos. "My name is irrelevant right now, Miss Vance," the man murmured, pulling me forcefully to my feet. "What is relevant is the truth about Clara Hayes' estate and the fact that you have been actively obscuring crucial probate documentation for nearly a decade. Clara Hayes, Chloe's biological mother, my sister." The very name sent an icy spike of pure terror through me. Chloe's rant had been wildly inaccurate in its specific details. I hadn't run off with David before Clara was divorced from her first husband. David and I had met years later. But the core implication, the monstrous connection between my life and Clara's death, was suddenly terrifyingly real. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered desperately, trying to pull away, acutely aware of the audience members now turning their attention from the stage spectacle to the second, smaller drama unfolding in the front row. "Clara was my sister. I loved her. I have no idea about any will or probate—" "Save it," the man interrupted, his voice gaining an edge of impatience. He didn't bother attempting subtlety anymore. He simply steered me, forcefully but without causing a public scene, toward the nearest side exit, bypassing the main doors which were now blocked by concerned faculty and gawking parents. "We know you moved to this town immediately after Clara's final medical discharge. We know you were the one who pushed David toward adopting Chloe so quickly. And we know you used your knowledge of your sister's deep depression, a depression you actively fueled, by the way, to secure an advantageous position." My head spun. Depression pushed David? Clara had been ill, a long, drawn-out battle with a condition that had eventually taken her life. I had been there for her, helping David manage the house and the child while she faded. That was the narrative, the only narrative I had ever known. "You're insane. I was supporting them," I protested, stumbling as the man propelled me down a narrow, carpeted corridor backstage. Supporting them, or ensuring the primary asset, David's substantial, if currently tied-up inheritance, was ultimately secured for your benefit, he countered, stopping abruptly outside a heavy metal door marked "Staff Only." He produced a laminated ID and flashed it at me. It confirmed he was some kind of legal officer, possibly court-appointed. "We found the first letter, Eleanor, the one Chloe mentioned, the one where Clara confessed to forging the prenuptial agreement to protect you from her first husband's family years ago, the one she wanted retracted before her final relapse. You intercepted it. You hid it." This was a nightmare built on shifting sand. My own past, which I thought I had compartmentalized and dealt with in therapy after Clara's death, was now being weaponized against me, and Chloe, somehow, was the catalyst for its resurrection. "And Chloe knows," the investigator said, his eyes drilling into mine as he unlocked the heavy door with a key card. "She figured out the truth about the locket, that it was a decoy your mother gave you, the real one being the key to the safety deposit box where the original will is hidden. She was going to expose you right now, weren't you?" He pushed me roughly into a small, windowless supply room stacked high with cleaning equipment and discarded stage props. The air was stale and metallic. "But Chloe made one crucial mistake," the man continued, leaning in close, his breath warm and smelling faintly of peppermint. "She revealed too much information on stage, information that only the perpetrator or someone extremely close to the truth would know, specifically the detail about the first husband's family." My blood ran cold for a different reason now. Chloe had mentioned the first husband's family only when quoting the supposed contents of the letter she found, a letter I had never seen. How could she know that detail unless someone fed her that information? Someone who knew the highly specific, long-buried history of my first marriage? "Who told her that?" I demanded, stepping back until I hit a shelf stacked with dusty theater flats. David wouldn't. He never knew about my first marriage being complicated by inheritance. The investigator gave a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, David didn't tell her, Eleanor. David still thinks you're cleaning up after his dead wife's melodrama, but someone else has been watching you, very closely, for a very long time." He reached into his inner jacket pocket, ignoring my frantic attempts to understand. He pulled out a folded, yellowed newspaper clipping. It wasn't from this town. It was from the city where I grew up, dated nearly 15 years ago. The headline was small, almost unnoticeable, reporting on a minor embezzlement conviction that had been swiftly sealed by a powerful lawyer. He smoothed the clipping on the side of a large plastic mop bucket, pointing to the picture of the convicted individual, a young, dark-haired woman, barely 20. "Your sister Clara didn't just have a first husband, Eleanor," the investigator said softly, his voice now laced with grim certainty. "She had a twin sister, one who was institutionalized right after you both turned 18. And guess who the prosecuting attorney was on that embezzlement case? The one who guaranteed the conviction would be sealed away forever, allowing the family estate to pass cleanly to you." He slowly turned the clipping around, revealing the name printed neatly beneath the mugshot of the convicted woman. My breath hitched so violently I thought I might pass out. The name wasn't mine, Eleanor Vance. It was Elaine Vance, my twin. The sister I was told died of an aggressive fever when we were children, the one whose memory I had mourned every single birthday for 20 years. "That's not me," I stammered, pointing weakly at the picture of the woman who looked exactly like me, only harder, angrier. "That's not. It is you, Eleanor. Or rather, it's the one they thought was dead. But she's not. She was just waiting. And now, thanks to Chloe playing amateur detective, she has the evidence she needs to prove that you are the fraud," the investigator finished, looking past me toward the door. "And she's about to walk right in here to collect her due." Before I could scream, the heavy metal door burst open, not with the sound of the investigator's key, but with a violent kick from the outside. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the brightly lit corridor, was the figure of a woman who was my exact mirror image, down to the faint scar above the left eyebrow that I had always hated. But her eyes were burning with an intensity that dwarfed even Chloe's earlier fury. "Hello, sister," the woman snarled, taking a deliberate step into the room, her hand already reaching for something bulky concealed beneath her suit jacket. "Did you really think David's precious little stepdaughter was the only one who knew how to dig?" The resemblance was horrifying, a physical manifestation of a buried, cancerous secret. The woman, Elaine, the twin I was told died in childhood, was a ghost made solid, radiating dangerous energy. The investigator, who moments ago seemed in complete control, visibly flinched, momentarily losing his aggressive stance as he recognized the new threat. He instinctively shifted his body to shield me from the doorway. "Elaine," the investigator breathed, his professional composure finally cracking, replaced by undisguised alarm. "This wasn't the arrangement. We had a deal for full immunity if you cooperated with the estate review." Elaine laughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed horribly in the small supply closet. "Deals are for amateurs, Agent Thorne. You think I let you run point on my revenge? You just cleared the path. You gave me the perfect distraction." She leveled her gaze at me, bypassing Thorne entirely. "Look at you, Eleanor. Still playing the dutiful, fragile wife of the man who never loved you, just like you played the dutiful, fragile child." My mind raced, desperately trying to stitch together the impossible tapestry of lies. Twin sister alive? Embezzlement? Why would my parents, who I believe died when I was young, have allowed everyone to think I was an only child? And if Elaine was my twin, why did Clara Hayes, my sister, marry David, a man I thought I met innocently at a professional mixer? David. "He married Clara because he loved her," I whispered, the defense weak even to my own ears. "I only got involved after she was sick." Elaine tilted her head, mocking my innocence. "Oh, sweetheart, David didn't marry Clara because he loved her. David married Clara because he was desperate to marry into your mother's family, the family who owned the controlling shares of that museum you're so proud of. And guess who was the only clear heir once Clara was out of the picture?" She stepped fully into the room, and I saw the glint of metal she held beneath her jacket wasn't a gun, but a thick, heavy-duty staple gun. The industrial kind used for framing, designed to drive long, thick fasteners. A chillingly specific tool for an elaborate grudge. "You see, Eleanor, I watched you from the periphery for years," Elaine continued, her voice a venomous lullaby. "I watched you secure David, secure the doctorate, secure the legacy. I waited until you were at your peak, the moment you thought you finally fooled everyone, to introduce the real variable." She nodded toward the door that led back to the auditorium, where the muffled sounds of David and Chloe's struggle were still audible. Chloe, My blood turned to ice. Chloe, my stepdaughter. Chloe isn't David's daughter, Eleanor, Elaine stated simply, her eyes shining with psychotic victory. She's Clara's, yes, but Clara was dying and desperate to ensure her daughter was cared for by someone she trusted completely, someone who wouldn't siphon off the inheritance or let you control the narrative. Agent Thorne, recovering from his shock, took a cautious step forward. Elaine, the sealed records clearly state David is the father. You are hallucinating based on old paranoia. Am I? Elaine snapped, whirling on Thorne. Then tell me, Agent, if David is Chloe's father, why did Clara's original last will, the one Eleanor intercepted, leave the sole guardianship of Chloe, along with a trust fund that matures only when Chloe turns 18, to me, her estranged, convicted twin sister? The logic hit me with the force of a physical impact. The embezzlement, the feigned illness, the rapid marriage to David. It had all been an elaborate, decades-long scheme orchestrated by my own mother's family to keep control of their assets, using David as a pawn, and me, the favored, outwardly pure twin, as the perfect placeholder wife. And Chloe wasn't just my stepdaughter, she was the unwitting time bomb set to detonate my entire fabricated life. You set this up, I whispered to Elaine, realizing the depth of the manipulation. You used Chloe's graduation as the stage. You told her what to say to hurt me the most. Of course I did, Elaine hissed, advancing on me until she stood toe-to-toe, the metallic scent of the staple gun heavy in the air between us. Chloe is the key. She's the only one with the legal standing now that she's 18 to challenge the original adoption papers. Papers I know you forged after the first will was legally executed in my favor. You didn't just steal my inheritance, Eleanor. You stole my daughter. Suddenly, the heavy metal door behind Elaine swung inward again, but this time it wasn't a struggle that announced the arrival. It was the unmistakable, terrified voice of my husband. Eleanor, get away from her. She's unstable. I saw what she did to the usher. She hit him with that thing. David burst into the cramped room, breathing hard, his eyes wide with panic, looking wildly between me, Thorne, and Elaine. He didn't recognize Elaine, focusing only on the menacing tool in her hand. David, listen to me, I pleaded, pushing past Thorne. She's my twin sister. She's alive. She's claiming Chloe. David barely registered my words. He saw only the threat of the stranger with the weapon. He lunged not for me, but for Elaine, trying to disarm her, shouting, I won't let you hurt my wife again. As David tackled Elaine low, there was a sharp, sickening thwack as the staple gun discharged not into a wooden frame, but into the small of David's back, the heavy gauge fastener burying itself deep. David collapsed with a choked cry, slumping against the doorframe, his momentum slamming the door shut and plunging the small room into absolute pitch-black darkness. The only sounds were David's ragged gasps, Agent Thorne shouting an obscenity, and Elaine's triumphant, manic laughter echoing from somewhere very close in the sudden void. Then, the laughter was cut short by the sharp, heavy sound of metal scraping on concrete, followed by a slow, deliberate click, the sound of the heavy deadbolt on the outside of the staff room door engaging. We were locked in the dark, David severely wounded, Thorne struggling to see, and Elaine, the ghost twin I was supposed to be grieving, was somewhere in the suffocating blackness with a weapon, ready to finish the job she started decades ago. The darkness was absolute, heavy, and suffocating, punctuated only by David's agonizing, wet gasps. In the blackness, the sounds became magnified, the frantic scrabbling of Agent Thorne trying to find a light switch or draw a concealed weapon, Elaine's chilling, steady breathing, and my own heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Eleanor, are you okay?" David choked out, his voice already fading, thick with pain. "I'm fine, David. Stay still." I tried to move toward the sound of his voice, but the small room was instantly treacherous. I tripped over something soft, Thorne perhaps, and then my foot connected with the heavy staple gun where it had clattered away from Elaine. I snatched it up reflexively, the cold, hard metal a terrifying anchor in the chaos. "Don't move, Thorne!" Elaine's voice sliced through the blackness, startlingly close to Agent Thorne. "You're wearing a wire, aren't you? I'll find it. I'll find everything." I realized then that this wasn't just about my past. It was about a larger conspiracy involving Agent Thorne, who was clearly not just a simple investigator, but someone who had been working against Elaine, perhaps for the museum board or the family David married into. "Elaine, stop! You don't know what you're doing to Chloe!" I yelled into the darkness, aiming the staple gun vaguely in the direction of her last known location. It was a desperate gamble, using the weapon against the very person who introduced the idea of my stolen legacy. A sudden sharp sound, a metal hinge squeaking, told me Thorne had found the doorframe and was trying to brace himself against the deadbolt. "She's got the key card, Eleanor. I saw the glint when she locked us in," Thorne reported, his voice tight with strain. "We're trapped." "Not for long," Elaine purred, and I heard the distinct thwack of the staple gun being primed again, this time much closer to me. I didn't hesitate. Instinct honed by 10 years of fiercely protecting David's family and the life I built took over. I didn't aim for Elaine. I aimed for the floor, firing the industrial staple gun blindly in a wide arc, hoping the noise and the recoil would disorient her. Thwack! The sound was deafening in the confined space, followed by a yelp of surprise that was definitely not Thorne's or David's. The recoil jarred my arm, but I felt a brief, satisfying sense of disruption. "You hit the box of cleaning fluid!" Thorne yelled triumphantly from the door. "I hear the splash." In the second of confusion, I heard the sound of glass shattering. The cleaning fluid must have been near a window or a shelved bottle. Thorne seized the opportunity, slamming his shoulder against the door repeatedly. "David, hold on!" I shouted, crawling on my hands and knees toward the weak groans that indicated David's location. I found him first, his breath shallow, his back hot and slick beneath my trembling hands. I gently probed the area around the entry wound, careful not to move him much. The projectile was deep. "It's bad, David," I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision, washing away the years of carefully constructed composure. "It's okay, Elle," he managed, using the nickname only my real mother used for me, the name Elaine shared. It was a final, agonizing confirmation that he had known something about my past, perhaps even about Elaine all along. "Just tell Chloe the truth about the adoption papers. She deserves that much." Just as David's voice trailed off into near silence, Thorne's desperate battering finally paid off. With a terrible screech of protesting metal, the deadbolt gave way. Light flooded the small room, blinding us all momentarily. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed security guards who must have finally responded to the principal's frantic call, was Chloe. She hadn't returned to her seat. She had followed the commotion. Her face, moments ago set in cold fury on stage, was now a horrifying kaleidoscope of shock, grief, and dawning horror as she took in the scene. Agent Thorne bruised and disheveled, David bleeding out on the floor, the stranger who looked eerily like me, holding an industrial staple gun, and the shattered cleaning supplies. "Dad!" Chloe screamed, rushing past the guards toward David. Elaine, however, saw her opening. She lunged past Thorne, heading not for Chloe, but for the spot where I had dropped the staple gun, but I was faster. As Elaine reached down, I brought my heel down hard on her wrist. She shrieked, releasing the weapon, which skittered across the floor. "You lied about everything," Chloe sobbed, cradling David's head, looking up at me with utter betrayal. "The locket, the letter, the sister, you knew. You knew who she was, and you let me use her lies to tear you apart." "Chloe, listen to me," I cried, dropping the staple gun and scrambling toward David. "It's complicated. She's manipulative. David, he knew about the adoption papers. That's what he meant." Agent Thorne, now fully alert and professional, moved with astonishing speed. He ignored the bleeding David and the hysterical Chloe, focusing entirely on the immediate threat. He physically tackled Elaine as she tried to scramble back up, cuffing her wrists with practiced efficiency. "Eleanor Vance," Thorne said, his voice now carrying the authority of law enforcement, addressing me directly as he dragged the struggling Elaine backward. "The game is over. David Hayes is being airlifted. You are coming with me as a material witness concerning the alleged forgery of adoption documents and the unlawful restraint of a family member, your sister. That is the extent of your cooperation today." He shoved the bewildered Elaine toward the main corridor and then turned back to me, his expression grim. "But I will tell you this much. Chloe is David's daughter. The adoption was clean, Eleanor. Your sister's jealousy was aimed at the wrong target. David married Clara for love, not the shares. He only hid the existence of you, his wife's estranged twin, because he wanted you to have a fresh start, away from the scandal of your first marriage and your mother's dubious legacy." He paused at the doorway, gesturing for me to follow him, away from Chloe and the unconscious David. "The only thing you actually forged, Eleanor, was the paperwork that granted you the authority to be Chloe's stepmother in the first place, because you were too afraid to tell David you were actually the aunt she needed." He looked down the corridor, where Elaine was being led away, screaming my name and Chloe's name in a terrifying duet. "You got everything you thought you wanted, Eleanor, but you never bothered to read the fine print on your own life.